They smiled, passed the ribs, and toasted 25 years of family legacy. But while the whole town celebrated, my 12-year-old son was inside the house, hearing them plot to have me declared mentally unfit. The people who raised me, who I once called Mom and Dad, were planning to take everything: my land, my name, even my child. I didn't scream. I didn't confront. I vanished. And what came next? Let's just say, when betrayal simmers that long, the revenge is served colder than they ever saw coming. Before I continue my story, where are you watching from? Hit that like and subscribe button. If you've ever been betrayed by the ones you trusted most, stay with me. Trust me. You'll want to hear how this unfolds. They called it a celebration of legacy. 25 years of Maddox Ranch. A tent draped in gold bunting stood beneath the New Mexico sun, flanked by folding chairs, wildflower centerpieces, and too many cameras. I stood at the edge of the party near the corral fence, smiling with my teeth but not my eyes. The barbecue smoke curled into the air while townspeople clinked lemonade glasses and gushed about how grateful I must be to have such devoted godparents. No one noticed my silence. That's the thing about living in someone else's shadow. People don't look too closely at what the light leaves out. Helen and Earl Maddox gave speeches, thanked the community, and then pulled Evan, my son, into a picture with their arms draped around his shoulders like he belonged more to them than to me. I didn't flinch. I just watched. I'd spent most of my life learning how to disappear without leaving. My stepbrother Julian, polished and smug in his tailored jeans, raised his glass and said, "To the next 25 years." The crowd cheered. Evan stood stiff in the photo, his smile thin. I could see it from across the yard. I didn't know what he'd overheard yet. I didn't know that just 20 minutes earlier, in the back hallway of the ranch house, he'd paused outside the study door. I didn't know that inside, Helen was whispering that it was time to make Brenda disappear quietly, or that Earl had suggested bringing in a doctor to declare me unfit. Just long enough to transfer the deed. They spoke in the soft, reasonable tones of people planning something final. Evan didn't move. He didn't make a sound. He just listened and quietly slipped out. Backpack already packed. At the party, he found me by the fence and said 4 words I'll never forget. "We need to go." That was it. No explanation. Just urgency wrapped in calm. I looked at him. I knew that look. It was the same one I used to wear as a kid, hiding under tables while adults spoke in sharp tones and thought I wasn't listening. I didn't ask questions. I didn't even say goodbye. I squeezed his shoulder, turned, and walked away from the celebration. Right past the hay bales, the tablecloths, the family photos, and the pit of roasted lies. Nobody noticed. Or if they did, they didn't stop me. I didn't take my keys. I didn't grab my purse. I followed my son into the dry wind, knowing only that something had broken. Something permanent. That was the last day I ever set foot on Maddox Ranch. Not because they pushed me out, but because this time I chose to walk away. And next time, I'd be coming back different. They weren't my real parents, but they might as well have been. Helen and Earl Maddox took me in when I was 6, after my birth mother vanished during one of her spiritual retreats and never came back. I was too young to understand abandonment, but old enough to understand debt. They reminded me of it often, how they saved me, how they gave me everything, how I owed them a life. I never challenged it. Gratitude was survival. I did what they asked. I learned how to work the ranch by age 10, shoveling manure and mending fences while my stepbrother Julian got a dirt bike and weekends off. Earl said I was built for labor, while Julian was meant for leadership. I believed them. I didn't just help. I ran the place. By 15, I was organizing feed schedules, At 17, I was negotiating bulk hay prices. I made that land thrive while Julian played cowboy for the tourists, and Helen curated family albums that featured him 3 times as often as me. Still, I never once asked for recognition. I didn't need parades or praise. I just wanted to be safe, and to give that to Evan when he came along. I had him young, 20 and broke, but determined. His father was a wild storm I mistook for shelter, and once it turned violent, I didn't wait around for lightning to strike twice. I left with a baby, 2 garbage bags of clothes, and a hand-me-down truck. I came home to Maddox Ranch. Just until I get back on my feet, I told them. They nodded, smiled. But the price was already being set. I cleaned, I cooked, I ran payroll. I did it all while raising Evan. I couldn't afford daycare, so I wore him in a sling while I worked the stables. I missed meals so he wouldn't. I studied ranch accounting at night so I could take over admin duties during the day. And when the business started turning a higher profit, I didn't see a dime. Family doesn't bill family, Helen said, when I asked once about a stipend. You live here for free, don't you? It wasn't free. It cost me every piece of myself. Meanwhile, Julian bought a new truck, started a podcast about modern ranch leadership, and boasted on social media about the Maddox legacy. I was barely in the photos. That didn't surprise me. What did surprise me came 2 months before the barbecue, when I found a crumpled letter in the mailbox addressed to me. It was a legal notice. Not from the county, but from a private law firm. They'd filed a quiet title action on the Maddox Ranch, claiming that Helen and Earl had full ownership due to my diminished mental capacity. I stared at the words for a long time, not even understanding what they meant at first. When I confronted them, they laughed it off. Standard procedure, Earl said. Just cleaning up old records. Nothing to worry about. I wanted to believe him, but I didn't. That letter never left my sock drawer. I kept it like a secret scar, knowing one day I'd need it. But even then, I didn't know how deep the betrayal would go. I didn't know they'd come for my son, too. I didn't know that everything I thought I'd earned, the home, the trust, the family, was a stage set for my eventual removal. I wasn't their daughter. I was a placeholder, a workhorse with an expiration date. And they'd finally picked the day to turn me out. Sasha Whitmore hadn't set foot in Sagefield in over a decade, not since her father lost the old sawmill in a bad land deal, and the town treated their family like contagious poverty. She left at 19 with a backpack, a toolbox, and a grudge. I hadn't heard from her since, except for one birthday card 3 years ago that just said, "Still breathing, hope you are too." When I called her after the barbecue, I didn't expect her to answer, but she did. On the second ring. Brenda? Her voice was scratchy, like it hadn't been used for small talk in years. I think I need your help, I said. Is Evan safe? She asked immediately. That was Sasha. Straight to the point, no sugar, no noise. I told her everything. The overheard plan, the forged legal letters, the shift in the house. So quiet it was almost graceful. She didn't gasp or ask for proof. She just said, "Where are you staying?" We met in an abandoned tool shed on the edge of Ridge Hollow, land her aunt still technically owned. Sasha had converted it into a mobile woodworking studio. She'd been building sustainable tiny homes in Taos and teaching design at a co-op. She looked the same, but tougher. Sun-worn face, calloused hands, boots older than Evan. When she hugged me, I froze for a second. I hadn't been touched like that in years. Like I wasn't broken or messy or weak. Like I was just known. I can't let them win, I whispered. Then let's make sure they don't, she replied. We didn't have a plan yet, but we had each other. That was new. I'd spent years alone, playing by rules they'd rigged in their favor. But Sasha didn't care about playing fair. She cared about building something that couldn't be taken. Over the next week, we moved into the back of her work van. Evan slept in a hammock strung between roof beams while Sasha and I took turns crashing on the folded workbench. She helped me file an informal ownership dispute through the town records office, not a lawsuit, just a red flag in the system. Now, if they try to move anything legally, she said, it'll set off alarms. Then she printed every email, every receipt, every document I'd signed for them, often under pressure, sometimes while exhausted. We labeled files, built a timeline, and dug through property records. That's when we found it. A recorded phone call Julian had made to a real estate developer 3 months earlier, pitching the Maddox Ranch as prime land nearly under our control. That call had been transcribed into a brokerage file, public, searchable. He'd been planning to sell before I was even notified of any changes. I remember Sasha reading it out loud, her voice like a blade. "They're not just trying to push you out, Bren. They've already replaced you." Something in me snapped, not in a loud, fiery way, more like a bone resetting, cold, clean, necessary. I wasn't going back to beg. I was coming back to be seen. Properly, finally, and this time not as a Maddox, as Brenda Reyes, the woman who didn't flinch when the house caught fire, because she'd already been rebuilding elsewhere. We didn't announce ourselves. We didn't post online. No war drums, no threats. Sasha and I worked like ghosts, moving through back alleys of bureaucracy, stitching together evidence, building leverage piece by piece. While the Maddox family flaunted staged photos of ranch life, I was in the county clerk's basement pulling microfilm of the original land transfer documents. And while Julian recorded podcast episodes about visionary rural development, Sasha was teaching Evan how to record audio using a secondhand field mic she rigged to look like a toy. Every night, we camped just outside town limits in a patch of juniper trees, where the cell signal was terrible, but the silence was safe. Evan didn't talk much at first. I didn't push. But one night, as we ate burnt marshmallows and drank well water out of old mason jars, he looked at me and said, "I think I can get them saying it again." I didn't ask him to explain. I knew what he meant. 2 days later, he returned from a visit to the ranch, a visit I staged under the pretense of clarifying things for the family. He took his backpack, the recorder hidden inside a stitched pocket, and stayed exactly 27 minutes. When he got back, he didn't speak. He just handed the recorder to Sasha. The file wasn't perfect. Some of it muffled, a few seconds cut off, but it was enough. Helen's voice, sharp and condescending. "She'll crack soon. Just wait. We'll have a psych eval in front of the board next week." Earl's answer, low and smug. "Once we show she's unstable, we take full control. Julian's already lining up buyers." Then Julian chiming in. "And if that doesn't work, we tell people she left Evan. Let the town fill in the blanks." I listened to it only once. I didn't need to hear it again. I'd heard enough gaslighting in my life to know when someone thinks they own your story. We printed transcripts, backed up the file 5 times, and put the original SD card in a sealed envelope addressed to the town registrar. "We don't hit them in court," Sasha said. "We hit them in public, where they can't spin it." It just so happened that the Sagefield Town Land Commission was holding its annual meeting in 3 days. On the agenda, proposed redevelopment zones, Maddox Ranch Corridor. They'd already named the land after themselves. Already written me out. Sasha signed us up to speak. No fake names, no disguises. Just the 3 of us. 1 woman, 1 child, and 1 friend who had watched enough people get erased to know how to stop it. The night before the meeting, I didn't sleep. Evan curled up beside me with the recorder in his hands like it was a shield. Sasha sat on the floor sketching rough blueprints for a stable she wanted to build, once all this mess is done. I stared at the ceiling of the van and whispered to myself, they think they're ready. But they had no idea what was coming, because when silence ends, it doesn't whisper, it detonates. The Sagefield Town Land Commission meeting was held in the back of the community center, where the chairs were mismatched and the air conditioner never quite worked. The front row was filled with ranch developers in pressed shirts and town council members pretending to read from printed agendas. Julian stood at the podium, midway through a rehearsed pitch about sustainable rural luxury and multi-phase investment partnerships. Behind him, Helen and Earl sat like royalty, nodding politely, hands folded. I walked in just as he clicked to a slide labeled Reclamation Potential, Post-Family Stewardship. I didn't have to guess who that family was. I stood in the back with Sasha on my right and Evan on my left. The room didn't notice us at first. We didn't look like a threat. No pressed suits, no name tags, no smiles. When Julian stepped down, a commissioner asked, "Any public comment on this agenda item?" That was our cue. I moved forward and handed the SD card to the clerk. "If it's all right," I said, "I'd like to submit audio evidence directly relevant to this proposal." The room stilled. The clerk looked at the council, who nodded hesitantly. They played it through the speaker system, raw, unedited. Helen's voice echoed first. "She'll crack soon. Just wait, we'll have a psych eval in front of the board next week." Earl followed, smooth and certain. "Once we show she's unstable, we take full control. Julian's already lining up buyers." Then Julian's part, flat and confident. "And if that doesn't work, we tell people she left Evan." Let the town fill in the blanks. When the last word faded, nobody moved. The silence wasn't polite. It was stunned. The commission chair cleared his throat. "And this is my godparents," I said. "The ones petitioning for redevelopment. And my stepbrother, who doesn't live on the ranch but is planning to sell it." Helen stood abruptly. "This is a distortion, taken out of context. The context is clear," Sasha interrupted from the back. "It's a premeditated fraud involving forged mental health claims to steal land." I pulled a file from my bag and held it up. "These are copies of my notarized caretaking agreements, payroll ledgers, medical affidavits. I've been running Maddox Ranch for 17 years. They tried to erase that. Erase me, because I wouldn't sign it over." Julian tried to speak, but the crowd was already shifting. Someone near the front said, "Is that true?" Another muttered, "I thought Brenda ran the place." Someone else called out, "I remember when she handled the cattle blight herself." Twice. Helen reached for Earl's hand, but his grip was limp. He knew it was over. The commission chair looked down at the printouts, then at me. "The board will be pausing all development discussions regarding Maddox Ranch pending full investigation, and this audio will be entered into public record." I nodded, silent, not victorious, just steady. As we walked out, Helen whispered my name like a question, as if maybe I'd turn, maybe I'd give her a final word. I didn't. Evan reached for my hand. Sasha kept walking. Outside, the wind had picked up, blowing dust off the tires of parked pickups and rattling the flagpoles near the entrance. "What happens now?" Evan asked. I looked at him. Really looked. "Now?" I said. "Now we start planting." "Trees?" he asked. "Yes," I replied. "And stories. The kind nobody else can steal." He smiled for the first time in weeks. We walked into the wind together. Not as survivors, as founders. Of something no one would ever be able to bury again. They didn't go to jail. People like Helen and Earl rarely do. But they did lose something they couldn't buy back: credibility. The Land Commission flagged their accounts, revoked Julian's development proposals, and issued a formal inquiry into their conduct. Within a month, their social invitations dried up. Church potlucks grew colder. Maddox Ranch signs were quietly removed from the main road. Their lawyer backed out. Their developer contacts vanished. And the town, small, watchful, and quick to judge, started whispering a different story. One where I wasn't the unstable caretaker, but the one who had held it all together for far too long. They tried once more. A letter this time. Thick paper. Gold embossing. It read like an apology, but was really just a plea. Let's meet. Clear the air. Family matters more than pride. I didn't respond. I didn't burn it either. I left it in the fireplace unlit, untouched. Let silence answer them. Evan and I moved into the West Cottage. Sasha stayed in the main house, gutting it room by room, replacing every trace of pretense with truth. The first thing we rebuilt wasn't the fences or the roof. It was the kitchen table. We made it together. Evan sanding, Sasha joining wood, me oiling the grain. No one had to speak. The work spoke for us. One night, over soup and laughter, Evan looked up and said, "It feels real now." And he was right. It did. I no longer walked around expecting the floor to collapse under me. I no longer held my breath waiting for someone to turn love into leverage. I wasn't afraid of what I'd lost, because what I'd built couldn't be taken. It didn't wear a title or hide behind bloodlines. It lived in the hands that built the table, in the roots of the trees we planted, in the stories we told freely. I used to think silence was surrender, but it's not. It's a boundary, a refusal, a weapon sharper than any accusation. Because some betrayals don't deserve to be screamed about. They deserve to be seen, and then left behind. I didn't destroy my godparents. I just refused to stay beneath them. They lit the match. I grew something from the ashes, and if they ever drive past this land again, they'll see it thriving, just out of reach. That's not revenge. That's reclamation. And I'll take that over forgiveness any day. What this story teaches us, quietly but powerfully, is that not all betrayal is loud. Sometimes it wears the face of the people who once tucked you in at night. Brenda's story is a reminder that the most dangerous form of manipulation isn't always violence or shouting. It's when love is transactional, when gratitude is weaponized, and when loyalty is used to excuse exploitation. Her godparents didn't strike suddenly. They groomed her to believe she owed them everything, that sacrifice was her role, and that silence meant survival. But what Brenda discovers, and what so many people need to, is that silence can also be a choice, a refusal, a reset. When she walks away, it's not just from a ranch. It's from a narrative written without her consent. This story isn't about courtroom battles or explosive confrontations. It's about calculated reclamation. Brenda doesn't get justice through screaming. She gets it through strategy, through patience, through proof. And when the truth is finally heard, it isn't just the Maddox name that crumbles. It's the illusion of their control. The final message is deeply American in spirit. You don't owe anyone the right to control your future, not even family, especially not family who confuse closeness with ownership. Forgiveness can be healing, yes, but sometimes the most liberating act is walking away without apology, letting your success, your peace, your boundaries speak for you. If you've ever felt like your role in a family, relationship, or workplace is to be useful rather than loved, pay attention. Notice who only shows up when you're valuable. Ask yourself, would these people still love me if I stopped producing, pleasing, or protecting them? If the answer is no, It may be time to reconsider who deserves access to you. You don't need to scream to reclaim your worth. You need to know it, plan with it, and protect it like sacred ground. How to get started today. 1. Write down one boundary you've been afraid to set, and set it, quietly but firmly. 2. Back up any important financial or legal records. Know where your power lies. 3. Reach out to one person who has supported you without condition. Thank them. 4. Ask yourself, what does real peace look like for me? Then take one step toward that image. Have you ever had to walk away from someone who claimed to love you but only loved your usefulness? Share your story in the comments. Subscribe for more stories like this. And don't forget to send this to someone who needs to hear it.